Excellent. We're so glad that you guys are all here. Welcome again. If you just jumped into this is episode 7 of the Adapt and Overcome webinar series, and we're so excited to hear from our amazing panelists today. As I mentioned before, their LinkedIn profiles are in the chat, so as this is wrapping up, feel free to jump in there and connect with them. So I'm Emily. I'm the VP of Strategy here at Alt RPO. I work with Sean and John, and in today's episode, we're focusing on organizational transformation in the wake of this COVID-19 pandemic that we all find ourselves in. Our host, Sean and John, will be having a panel-style discussion with the guests, and we encourage everybody that's attending to participate in 2 ways. So number 1, please submit your questions as we're going. If there's anything that you're curious about or you want to direct at any of the panelists or the group as a whole, put the questions in the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen. That way we can keep track of what's been answered or not. If you put them in the chat, they tend to get lost. So please make sure you put those into the Q&A box. And then if you have any ideas, tips, resources, if someone asks a question and you want to give an answer, or anything that you feel like would contribute to the conversation, feel free to put that in the chat. So questions in the Q&A box. Anything else, feel free to share in the chat. We love hearing from you guys. We've had some really great discussion on our past webinars there in the chat with you all. So without further ado, let me introduce our hosts. Sean is the CEO of Alt RPO. Alt RPO is a team building and facilitation company with a 100% remote team. Prior to Alt RPO, Sean took part in various startups focused on human performance, and he leverages his experience as a Navy SEAL to bring a unique perspective to our current challenges. John is our facilitation Jedi. He's a master facilitator. He focuses on team building and process improvement. John has conducted hundreds of workshops, and he leverages his experience as an innovation team leader in the U.S. Navy to help shift teams to collective and collaborative thinking. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to them and send us your questions, and we'll bring them into the conversation throughout.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Emily. And we're glad to have all the panelists here. We've got, as you could tell from the intros, a lot of different backgrounds, and that's really, what we're aiming for here. We're looking for those different perspectives. We're looking for ways to adapt and overcome given the current situation that's rapidly evolving, and it seems like every day, we're facing something new. So we'll go ahead and we'll kick this off with the first question about what's the biggest adaptation you've made so far since this pandemic has happened. And I'd like to kick that over to JJ to start, whether it's, personal or related to your organization. What is that big thing that you've had to adapt to?
Well, in my company, we do a lot of coaching and training and workshops in person. And that's mainly what we do. And on a Saturday, a couple Saturdays ago, I said, we can no longer do that. And we had something on Tuesday that was scheduled, and we went virtual then, we had something the next day. So we've done about 10 or 12 different types of things, everything from coaching individual teams, coaching executives, training 50 people at once. Some of them, as I said, listen, the 10th one is going to be a lot better than the 3rd one. Yeah. So we're getting to the 10th one, and it's good, but it's very it's challenging for when you really try to perfect the in-person stuff and adjusting that and finding what the cues are and how to have the same kind of impact virtually. I don't think I've mastered that yet, but I'm working on it.
Great. And Jamie, what about you? I know you said pretty much everything has been uprooted and completely changed. So maybe you could talk through that a bit.
Yeah, for us, I haven't been this unemployed since I was 15. And even then I could go and, pound a nail or, mow a lawn or something and generate some revenue. So all of the events that we were involved in were external. They were either booked via, I was lucky enough to have an agent, and sounds fancy, but it isn't. But they would book my public speaking, and whether that was a keynote or the sort of day-long facilitation stuff that we did was generally run through them. And I keep touching my face. I gotta remember myself not to. It's good to watch yourself on video. Stop touching your face, John. And so our life in that regard has shut down because all of those events, every single one of them, was shut down in pretty much overnight, although we saw it coming. Even stuff into January. I had some events that were booked for January 2021. I think about 5 days ago, an event, February, was canceled, whether it be rebooked or not. So a real change, and which at first was a bit of a gut punch. I think when you go through such a change like that, there's this emotional wave, and I think often we want to move to action right away and think, oh, okay, what are we going to do? But we had to take a bit of a pause, learning from life as a whole. It's important to kind of let the emotion roll through. So we kind of stood there a bit shocked, understanding and taking it seriously, and now kind of catching our breath a little bit. Don't want to move to action too quickly. I think sometimes we got to let the emotion be processed a bit, and so. I don't know where that's going to go. Maybe I've given my last keynote for a long, long time. I'm not sure. But Barb and I are working, my wife and I, with whom I work in this, as using tools right now, trying to figure them out. I wasn't a Zoom expert. I'm becoming a Zoom expert, and every other communication tool, and helping our clients. And just getting on the phone for the first hour of their team meeting and spending, or rather, the first 15 minutes and just talking to them to kind of set the mood and maybe be constructive. But really right now, it's just we're thinking about how can we be of service. I'm not sure how we're going to make a living, and that's not what we need to panic about right now. But our primary focus right now is how can we really be of service in our immediate community by staying home, and to the larger community by using cool tools like this and delivering some value.
So do you see yourself actually in the future? Obviously you want to wait for the emotion and whatnot to subside, but do you see a potential future where you're giving some of these keynotes without traveling all over the world and doing them virtually?
Yeah, I do. And what's interesting is that I think I've been struggling to keep the cup half full. I think we generally kind of live our life with the cup half full. We're optimists in our DNA. I keep, to be honest, I look at it. We talked about it at the dinner table with our kids last night. JJ, we have kids too. Our son is 19 and our daughter 16. And my son, unfortunately, has a girlfriend at this time. So we're living through a little Romeo and Juliet situation here. And borderline had to tackle him at the door last night when he thought he was going to go out and visit his girlfriend, like physical restraint. So wow. We're into that. But I'm kind of sitting in this place right now where it's concern and worry, but excitement. And I'm almost feeling like I shouldn't be guilty about the excitement, because we don't want to be, capitalists in a situation that's difficult, but how can we be of service? But I do see, John, there's a chance here for us to really reinvent ourselves, and travel is hard on your body, and it does take a toll on the planet. So I'm obviously worried about where we are, but I'm also excited. And it's kind of this, I get a tsunami of worry, and then behind it, kind of this feeling of excitement that this reinvention, I wouldn't have done it on my own. Although I complain about travel sometimes, but I wouldn't have done anything about it. And so now we're getting forced to. So just trying to throttle those two things about believing in the possibility.
Yeah, I completely agree about the travel. I mean, it's amazing because we had one client that just since said they don't have any money, but they were right before this happened. And then it happened when we went virtual. It said, okay, well, we went to Europe, Houston, and Singapore. I'm like, well, you just saved $250,000 in travel costs alone. So, and being able to, so I did a thing the other day where I was coaching a team in London, and then I was coaching a team in California. It's like same day. So that was pretty amazing.
And for you, Valerie, I think all three of you guys are in a very similar situation. Same with, Emily, Sean, and myself, with doing things in the physical world, and acting and reacting to audiences is kind of how we make our bread and butter, and how we most serve our clients. So how are you acting or reacting to that, Valerie?
Right. So just like Jamie and JJ, I'm in the same boat. My business is fairly new, only 3 years old. So I've been working really hard to create success in a certain way. And doing things virtually has always been part of the program for later. It seemed like there always was going to be a later, especially when you're traveling a lot. It's hard to dig into that stuff. But now what I'm finding is really, really helpful is I've partnered up with somebody who's truly excellent at this. And she's actually a military spouse in Italy. So I get to see and connect with her a little bit about what life is like there. But with her project management skills, we are really cranking out this process for taking what we do in person and really busting it down into these 90-minute or so webinars. And while we're really on the beginning end of getting to test that out with people, I think now is the time where, you know, I'm happy to do some stuff for free, even though I don't have income coming in, because it gives me a chance to test it out. I can get feedback easily. I don't feel like there's this tension behind, like, was that good enough to warrant that particular price, which is really nice. And I'll say on like the real talk aspect, like this has definitely hit my business hard. And one of the things I had to do initially was to make sure my family was taken care of. Like overnight, 50% of our income just disappeared. And so for me, in order to do my best work now, I had to swallow my pride and take advantage of different programs like mortgage forbearance, student loan forbearance, and all of those things. So my just a little word of advice to anybody who's facing that, please, if there's something that can help you weather this storm, even if you have like a little nest egg of sorts to help you, take advantage of that stuff. It just gives you peace of mind so that you can focus on the work that you need to do for your business.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, I have 35 employees, and I feel the weight of that, and I have made the commitment to them that there will be no layoffs this calendar year. And awesome. To do that, you know, I'm looking at the CARES Act. I'm looking at a line of credit. We're making some revenue, but you know, we lost money in March. We're going to lose money in April. I hope I think we'll hopefully what's starting to happen is clients are realizing, because nothing really got canceled for us, it'll get pushed back. It's like, oh, well, let's do it in June. And then, oh, let's do it in July. And so I'm hoping people are starting to realize this is going to be a long time. And we still need to move on and do work. And so I'm hoping, and some of them are starting to realize that. So that's sort of our struggle. I mean, I got to tell you, that keeps me up at night is, 35 people, we're a small company, but 35 people rely on me to make sure that they can pay their mortgage. And one of the hardest things, I was talking to somebody the other day, on my team, like, what's the hard part? And I was like, well, I can't freak out at home because I have children, and I can't freak out in front of the company because I'm a leader. So I have to call a friend of mine and freak out when I'm down in the basement and talking to him.
Do you think that, I guess with 35 people, do you look inward to your company to try to look for innovative ideas to move the needle forward on your end, or are you doing that from more of a top-down approach, or how does that work? No,
I mean, I don't do any work. The teams do all the work and do all the innovation. I'm the pretty face on top. No, they're doing an incredible amount of innovation. We're offering our same products virtually. We're offering totally new products that they've come up with. We're doing it in different ways. They're inventing new things every day. It's really been amazing. It's been amazing to see. It is really incredible. And it's almost like, like Jamie was saying, it's almost like it's freed us to do things. I would never have chosen this. But it's sort of like we always had in the back of our brain, like Valerie, we should do, virtual at some point. And it just never sort of rose to the top of the backlog, and then it did. And so it's horrible what is going on. It is unbelievably horrible, and I don't have any words to describe it. And I think what I've been telling my company, the people I talk to, is I look back at a lot of the pandemics in the 19th century. You had like one every couple of years in the 19th century. Malaria, typhoid, cholera, whatever. And you know what? They end. Pandemics end. And maybe it takes a long time, but they do burn out eventually. And what I'm trying to do is think about, where do I want to be on the other side of this? How do I want to be positioned to take advantage of what happens next? And so I really don't want to cut down and lean out, because then when it ends, I won't be able to do anything. So I'm really hoping to not have to do that. I mean, you know, I'm taking a salary cut, other people are taking a salary. I mean, we're doing that kind of thing. But I really want to take advantage and use this time to innovate and create new things, because we have more time, because not everyone's booked all the time. So let's use it to create stuff.
There was a really good quote, Emily or Sean, maybe you can help me. It was on the last one from Noah. It was something to the effect of, if you envision where you want to be, so this goes off of what you said, JJ, you envision where you want to be at the end of this, and you ask yourself the question, you look back and you say, did I use my time wisely? Something to the effect of that. And if you see yourself saying, you know, gosh, I wish I would have done X, Y, or Z, you know, then do those things now. So for Jamie, like, you know, I don't know if this really hits for the public speaking events for you, but are you still going out and working out to prepare for some of these different expeditions and stuff that you potentially help people with? And are you attempting to come up with new products and reinvent certain things during this time? Like JJ was saying, like, what are you doing specifically to kind of not necessarily cope, but move the needle while we go through this?
Quick interruption, Jamie. Sorry, before you answer that, just if you guys are not wearing a mic, just maybe lean in a little bit or move your microphones up. I see some requests from the audience just to talk a little bit louder. And I think if we have them on, whoever's wearing them, you're pretty loud. So in a good way. So just lean in a little bit or speak up a little bit so people can hear you. And quick reminder, everyone, I see some great questions coming in. So please keep the questions coming in and we'll get to them here in a minute. But sorry, go for it, Jamie.
That's a great question, John.
Perfect.
So we are, one of the really important things for us, as a family is, and there's lots of great reading to be had about it, but when you talk about the maintaining physical activity is critical, and outdoor activity for us is critical. People who spend time outdoors are healthier, happier, more creative, and we need all of that right now. Our whole life as adventurers and outdoor enthusiasts has been built on that premise, but we're particularly leaning on it now. But interestingly enough, we're dialing back the intensity. Because when you work out really hard, you tax your body. Stress is stress is stress. Good stress, bad stress, it's still stress. And we need to keep our immune systems, we believe, as boosted as possible, especially from an aerobic level. High altitude climbing requires a lot of hard aerobic work, but we don't want to tax our bodies right now. It's just kind of what we've agreed to. But what we're looking for here is consistency. So every day we're getting out as a family. It's part of our daily routine. And that just helps us with tapping into the creativity that we need. So all of the expedition planning, all that stuff's been ceased. You know, we're 100% shut down. This kind of consulting work is the sole source of our revenue. So we're at zero. And we're just really trying to take that time to rethink how we can come to market afterward. But honestly, the first step, I think, for us, John, is we want to be able to figure out how we can be of service. And that's selfish, too, because I think when you do something helpful for others, you know, I think Val made good mention of it about not necessarily being worried about collecting a paycheck. It's my gestures out to clients right now have been, hey, can I help you with a meeting? If it leads into something down the line, great. But how can I help? And I think that's a way for us to kind of boost our well-being and self-esteem, like feeling like you can be useful. Luckily, we're just a small team. I used to have, like JJ did, with 52 employees, and that was stressful at normal times when business was good. So kudos to you, JJ. Hats off, man, for your commitment to your team. I can only imagine that. And I've had a few moments where I thought, wow, I'm so in a way happy that I don't have that big team, but also kind of missed it because I felt like if we did, we would really want to be like you, JJ, and take care of them. So it's kind of a both. To answer your question, then I'll shut up. It's a bit of both, kind of throttling. Let's be innovative and creative, but let's be of service. Because at the end of this, it's important for our family to look back and not only think about where we're going to be positioned, but how we behaved. Like, how do we show up right now? Like, it's easy to be a good citizen when everything's going well, but we're really thoughtful here in our house about how upon reflection, whether it's another 12 weeks as we think about here in Canada right now in terms of isolation. I know it's a big number, but that's what this nation's talking about, 12 weeks, end of June or beyond. how do we think we need to have showed up upon reflection? Because we don't get to come back to this moment and do it again. This is the moment. And so that's what we've been thinking about as a family.
I would agree with that, Jamie. That's a really powerful point where we're going through something. I was talking to my daughters the other day. I said, you're going to be telling your children about this. And this is, an unprecedented thing. And it's always back when you look back in history, like during World War II or something, how did people make choices? What choices did they make? This is very different, obviously, but how did people act? And when you're in the middle of it, like we are now, I think it's hard to sometimes see that what you do now matters. And that's really powerful, Jamie.
And adding to that, I'm so glad you're bringing that up, because one of the things I'm looking at in this time are how companies show up. How do they show up for their stakeholders? How do they show up for their employees? And who are the companies that are really truly living their values in a time when everything is so stressful and uncertain? And so one of the articles I've recently come across was done by a company called Just Capital. And what they're doing is they're actually taking note of 100 of America's top companies and what they're doing, whether it's working from home, protecting employees' paychecks, whether they're hourly or salaried, all of these different kinds of things. And I think to the extent that we can really highlight who's doing a good job, it sets the example for others. It makes that good behavior the new norm. And I think that's some of the silver linings that can come about as a result of this. Really having that sense that people will be taken care of through this pandemic and other emergencies or disasters as they go forward. But then also opening up the doors for things like remote work, which a lot of companies have really pushed back on for a long time. And we know that people are looking for more flexibility in their lives, whether it's for taking care of children, elderly parents, that sort of thing. So if we can make that more normalized, perhaps we can have more of that balance in our lives that we've been looking for ages. So that's just one thing I wanted to throw out there.
I think Emily has a question for you, but I wanted to ask something really quick before she jumps in. I think I remember reading something from you, Val, probably had to be about a month ago, where you were kind of recapping where you had been. And it was like you had been everywhere but your home for like ever. All over the world, etc. And so part of you, I'm maybe putting words in your mouth, part of you might be excited that you can do some of your work remotely? Question mark?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel lucky because when I am home, I am working from home, even if I'm traveling. I'm still adjusting. And I think that's something we need to remember. Even if people are used to working from home is different with your children there, especially school-age children. It's very different with your spouse at home. Like, we're all adjusting to different flavors and strategies of this. But I do love the time here. I am going to garden the heck out of my yard. Better in Nebraska. I'm going to have the most flowers anywhere. So awesome. There's lots of silver linings in Val's world.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was interesting. My wife and I, in the first week or two, we totally regressed to like last generation gender roles, where she's taking care of the kids and the meals and stuff, and I'm just working all the time. And fortunately, we were able to have an open conversation about it. And I had to like put time aside, a few hours a day, because I'm one of those, if I don't have time blocked on my calendar, someone will grab it. And so I have like 3 hours a day blocked off for homeschooling and cooking and that kind of stuff, which just reminds me I have something in the grill I got to check pretty soon. Hope it's not destroyed.
My husband is making bread today for the first time in the Instapot because we're out. So our gender roles are kind of switching, and I'm asking him to come up with the cocktail of the day to signify that the work is done, because he's home on admin leave and not working. So yeah, I'm putting him to work.
Excellent. So one of the things that that we've seen across all of the webinars we've done so far is productivity. Productivity seems to be one of the biggest challenges organizations, teams are having, and probably one of the biggest challenges they're trying to overcome. So, everyone has a really unique background here. Jamie, if we can start from you, taking lessons from, climbing and the other expeditions that you've done and applying them to to that? How do we help people become more collaborative? Any thoughts on that?
Sure. And that's a great subject, and it's come up a lot with the clients that I've helped with. And it's quite similar to being, although I've read some articles from astronauts of late who were talking about isolation and productivity. And I think part of the thing there is that you're anticipating it as an astronaut, not to take anything away from that amazing experience and learning. We didn't anticipate this. And part of it, climbing, you sometimes might anticipate getting stuck at a camp, but it's often a big surprise when it comes. And Barbara and I have been on climbs together and other expeditions where you get stuck in a storm and the avalanche conditions are such that you can't go up and you can't go down. You have limited fuel that you use to melt snow to hydrate. You only have so much toilet paper. And you're calculating this in many ways, the calories that you carried with you by the hour. And now you have 12 people trapped on the side of a mountain, can't go up, can't go down. And pretty much every question that everybody asks, the answer is, as a leader and collectively among the group, is, I don't know. When will the snow condition improve? I don't know. How long is this food going to last? I don't know. How much fuel do we have? Well, we know that, but how will we get resupply? I don't know. So that really has informed a lot of our experience as a family and in business. And in those situations on mountains where we didn't have some structure, we came unglued. People really came unglued. And I don't mean to be an alarmist. It's just, that was the lesson that we learned, emotional roller coasters that people went on. So having learned from that, when we ever got trapped again on mountains, we created schedule. Now you can't make work because you don't want to burn calories, and you're not just, because people will see through that. But I broke up. So if you had 3 tents on the mountain with 4 people per tent, you would create a routine through the day that every person in that tent would be form a team with someone else from all the other tents, and their job would be to check on the snow wall. Someone else's job would be to collect snow to melt it for the team. Someone else's job would be to secure the tents. And so we had this routine through the day. It wasn't laborious, but it was a routine that we had to follow. And you kind of created conversation. We had book club, The World According to Garp, on one trip, which melted most of our brains. But we sliced up the book with a razor blade and passed it among the group, and we forced dialogue and discussion. And so the routine that I found was really, really, really important as a leader, as a teammate, which would lead to our productivity. Because when you're surrounded by so much unknown, it kind of creeps in when you're trying to do work. And then you start thinking, well, why am I even bothering doing this work? It's useless after all. It's only noon, but I should probably just keep drinking. So long answer to your question, and then I'll be quiet. Having the routine was really important. I think it's important as parents. I think it's as important as entrepreneurs, as business people. And we can use tools like this one to create that routine. And it was that routine that led to productivity and was really quite effective in managing the emotional roller coaster that's natural, but helped us when the weather improved. To everyone, I think Valerie's point or JJ's point earlier, when the weather improved, boom, we were ready to go. Yeah,
that's a great point. And building on that, so JJ, from an agile Scrum standpoint, I've always drawn a lot of parallels to the simplicity of the idea, but I think it to me at least, it seems like it's almost more powerful in this situation where teams are struggling to be productive, and leveraging some of the tools that that are within Scrum, I think could be super beneficial. Maybe you could talk to that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, I would agree with Jamie. I mean, the Scrum is based around teams, and it's about forming teams, and there's sort of a really steady cycle. Like every day you meet for 15 minutes. Every week you show what you've done. And it is fairly, it's really rigid actually, but that forces it, because I've been in places like without ritual, without schedule, as Jamie was saying, you just go off the rails. I mean,
Absolutely.
Last time I was in, I'm not anything like this, but in Baghdad, I had a couple times I was in a house for 3 or 4 weeks and couldn't leave, and with no schedule. And I can tell you, drinking at noon was not uncommon. And so, having that, well, now, before I had kids, but now, like having that schedule is so important. And because what happens is you want to, especially if you're working in a team, is you want to communicate. You want this level of communication, which does 2 things. One is it just keeps you sane because you're talking to other people and you're not alone freaking out in your house. And two, it makes the work visible that everyone's doing. Because when you physically go to work, you announce your presence just by showing up, right? Hey, I'm here, my jacket's on my chair, I'm here. Yeah. But virtually, you have to show your presence by doing things, by producing value. And so it's a different mindset. And I think Scrum really does help with that. One team in the Royal Navy, they actually flipped to virtual, and they said it was one of the first teams we worked with there. And they said it was a lot easier for them because they had that team structure and schedule than it was for the other teams that they were working with. Yeah, and that definitely seems to be one of the big challenges. Is essentially overnight teams went from being in that office setting to not. And as time progresses, the first week, I think it's just a lot of getting used to. The second week, it's trying to figure out, okay, how am I actually going to do this? And by week 3, it's almost like, okay, we have to deliver, consistently, because at the end of the day, the business is still a business. And I think that's where it seems like a lot of the companies and teams are struggling. Valerie, anything to add on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always looking at things from the people perspective. And I think it's really important in this time to have a realistic expectation that your productivity will drop, just like you said, Sean. As many people are working from home for the first time. So they have to learn how they as individuals work best. And it may be very different with kids at home. So maybe their schedule is something early in the morning, kids working in the evening. And for managers, I think we've also brought up the point that if you're used to just looking at people being there in the office, now you have to focus on outcomes and deliverables. So to the extent that you can create that culture on your team, even virtually, where it feels like you're all learning, sharing your learnings as individuals for what's working from you from a productivity standpoint, sharing them for what's working on the team, and being very open and honest about how things are landing with you, what's working and what's not, I think then you'll be able to ramp up faster down the road. And that's some stuff that we've been talking about at Take Back Work, because one of the things we've found working with clients is that when you're doing these virtual meetings, it's so easy to simply focus on the operations aspect of stuff that you lose the humanity, those water cooler conversations that you're used to having, the ways you understand your employees as a manager. You have to set up the same kind of virtual coffees to make sure that you have that interaction and those context clues from your people so that you don't lose that going on. So we put out a couple blog posts over the past month on those things. That's so true, Valerie. That's so true, because I made it a point to meet with every single person in the company over the past weeks, and I'm finishing today at 4. And then I realized I hadn't talked to my own team, the leadership team, because I talk to them every day. But I hadn't done that sort of human connection. So now I'm talking that really human connection of how they're doing, because it was always just, all right, how do we do this? How do we do this? How do we do this? And the other thing, building what you're saying, Valerie, is that what I'm trying to do right now is, okay, we freaked out, as you're saying, John, we freaked out, figuring out now it's a little more calm, but okay, what can we do that we couldn't do physically? How is virtual better than what we did? And I don't have the answers to that, but that's what I'm sort of having the team sort of, hey, figure this out, because I bet you there's a lot of stuff that's better. And we've really fine-tuned the physical stuff. We're really good at it, but let's do the same thing virtually. So afterwards we can do both.
I want to piggyback on that. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Emily.
I was just going to say, we've been talking about the same thing on our team, and I was going to bring in a question, but if you had something else on that, go for it, John.
So just super quick, this piggybacks off of what Val and JJ just said is, Sean and I've had this conversation numerous times. It's basically like, just because something works in one area or arena for some organization doesn't mean that it's going to work for another, even in the same organization. So learning how people communicate, I personally believe it goes, you obviously need to, going backward from strategy. Let's say you need to accomplish some strategy. Before that, you need to be able to, do something with teams, right? Team building. Before that, you need to understand the tool and understand why they want to use something over some communication tool over another. So you can't just throw up a webinar or throw up some kind of session and say, we're going to solve these problems now. And so to Val's point, it's like, well, what do they want? Do they want to have this water cooler conversation in this way or another way? Is it a phone call that works better for this team, or a Zoom call? Is it, do you like email, or do we not want to be bothered by text messages? I mean, there's just a million things that you just need to find out what works. And then something that Sean and I have talked about a lot is it's okay to iterate. It's okay to try something new, find out if that works for your team, and then go, hey, as a, JJ, have a retrospect and go, did this actually work the way we thought it would? And should we change anything going forward for the following week to be more productive and be more connected as a team moving forward? So I just wanted to jump in there really quick before you ask another question, Emily.
Excellent. Yeah, we've been talking a lot about that same thing. What can we do now that we couldn't do before? How do we think, in the realms of possibilities? And actually, Jamie, something your wife Barbara said on a webinar, I think it was last week, she said something to the effect of, we're reimagining everything about the way we run our business. And I loved that phrase. Sean and John can tell you, I've brought it up a ton of times in conversations because I just think it's such a great way to express the opportunity that we have right now. I know that's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. And we've gotten a few questions, and I'm going to kind of wrap some of the questions from the audience up, I think, into hopefully kind of a cumulative question, because I think there's a lot of things that are along the same lines. We're getting a few Scrum ones, which I know are directed specifically at JJ, but I think all of you can speak to this because I know all of you have helped facilitate teams and worked with teams in different ways. And a lot of people are trying to transition their team to this remote model. So, they're saying a couple questions, one from Mark and one from David, are looking at, I think, twofold. Do you think that going forward, some of the things that you guys have done in person will be virtual, and what are you doing to help translate the richness or the depth that you're able to get in those in-person interactions into this virtual space? How are you reimagining that? I know Ernie asked, how do you pick up on those in-person cues when you're working remotely? And David asked, what are some of the first steps for Scrum teams that have never been working in this fully distributed model? So I know it's kind of a big question, but I think it all kind of speaks to the same thing of, when you're working with facilitating these teams, what can be some of the initial steps beyond those, making sure everyone's okay on a human level to bring that richness of those in-person interactions? Any tips on picking up on cues? And, even taking that Scrum structure or other structures you might have a step further as people have to continue remote?
I would say that one thing we started doing, one of the experiments we started running is at the end, we don't have meetings to have meetings. In every meeting, the beginning of it, we say, this is what the purpose of this meeting is. This is the outcome. And at the end of the meeting, someone is designated to write the outcome down in the action items and put them in a public Slack channel. This is what we agreed to do. And that has really helped us focus, I think. And the other thing that I've been coaching some of my own managers is show a little bit of vulnerability yourself. And there's my daughter turning something on. I don't know who it is, sorry, I'll mute myself. But yeah, I mean, it's being open and vulnerable, and then at the same time being really clear because it's really easy to sit in meetings all day. That's what I was doing. It's like, hold up, I'm in meetings all day and I'm not getting anything done. So I wanted to get stuff done. So just really see the meetings as the work and have something that you're going to get out of them. That's helped us.
So one of the things I would say too is that as a manager of a team, look for those opportunities to reach out to your people, to check in on something that they're working on that maybe they deserve some kudos or an offer of help or assistance. And also opening up the conversation with your people about when and how are the best time to reach them and check in. Because one of the things I'm hearing from those working at home is that it's like a constant barrage of pings, and it can be very, very distracting. So there might be something around creating those quiet space, whether it's team oriented or based on the needs of individuals, so that when you are reaching out, it's welcome, and you're also giving people the space they need to do the work they need to get done.
If I can add, Emily, to that, you asked a lot of questions in one question. But there is, I think that excitement piece is inside of our business, having a broad reach. I think using these tools will ultimately be able to, preach our gospel, because we believe in it, to more people. You can only be in front of so many audiences in so many places. Even if it's 10,000 people in an audience, or 300 or 30, you're stuck by that physical space. So I think we're quite excited about the possibility of, being able to reach more people with some of the ideas and tools that we have. And then I think the other thing, in terms of adapting, this whole experience now using this remote work, whether it's, using the normal communication tools of chat or email, is learning to speak a new language. It's like when I first was experiencing as a keynote speaker being translated. So you're in Tokyo and there's a booth of translators in the back, and you're getting translated into Japanese. Or you're at an international conference in Sao Paulo and there's a bank and there's 5 languages. You have to learn as a public speaker to speak differently because you have translation. Being a leader here and a communicator now, I think it's kind of an exciting way to learn how to speak and communicate in a new language. And that's been a pretty powerful understanding, is really putting yourself in the spot of the audience and how are they interpreting what you're saying. There's no immediate feedback from a group that you're having a meeting with. There isn't the eye contact that you'd normally have. And I think for a group like this and all the people who are watching, learning how to speak a different language. It's weird to stare at that tiny little hole at the camera, but it's so important to stare at it, right? And not be looking elsewhere. And when you're really talking to them and not bouncing around like I tend to, but bringing energy and inflection to your voice and engaging in a different way. So I think we're all going to learn what it's like to communicate in a different way. And that's kind of exciting. So I think we'll have greater reach when it's all over, and we're going to learn how to communicate in a different way. And I still think we can bring that energy and impact.
Yeah. So that's a great point. And we've got, prior to this, I think there was a lot of talk around burnout, and be it any industry, you could read an article or write up on how that industry is facing and dealing with burnout. We've now been thrust into a completely new situation. And I think, one of the questions that we're seeing from the audience is, how do you deal with that, right? So do we expect more levels of burnout? And I think there's a balance here, and we've heard this across several other webinar series, is, what are you guys doing personally to really define that balance and focus on, the holisticness of wellness piece for yourself, and being able to bring that into the workplace, even though they're one and the same right now. Anyone?
I don't want to be rude, so Valerie, get in there.
All right, let's see. What's coming to mind for me right now is that I have a friend who just recently posted in our group text that her boss is reaching out to her at 10 p.m. at night with action items and expecting responses at 9 a.m. the next day. And I think what we're all getting after is that if you probably wouldn't be doing this in the office, you shouldn't be doing it in the virtual world either. There need to be boundaries. And I think sometimes, something pops into your mind as a manager and you just feel like you want to get that email out, use schedule send it the next day, or have that conversation with your team about how sometimes things come up to you late at night or on the weekends, but that you're not really expecting them to hop on that until a reasonable duty day would commence. And if you're not thinking that way, you probably should, because it is contributing to stress for people who are already living under very weird and very unusual circumstances, who don't have the benefit of all the other things that they've created in their life to have the convenience and the bandwidth to get everything done. So I think we need to bring a little bit of humanity and also some boundary setting into this to prevent burnout across the board.
Valerie,
Absolutely.
I can't agree more. And I've hit a boundary of my own, so I'm going to need to drop off. But creating that space where it's defined, this is what when work is, and this is when work is not. I really agree. But thank you so much, John and Sean and Emily for inviting me, and Jamie and Valerie. This has been a fascinating conversation. I've already taken some notes from what you said, and I'm going to look into some things. So thanks a lot, and have a great day and stay safe.
Yeah, thank you, JJ.
Thanks, JJ.
I'm going to go off of what you said. Go ahead, Jamie. I'm going to go on what you said, Valerie. It's the something that I have personally struggled with, and this is not new. This has been me since the beginning of time. I don't have a very good defining line between work and home. I've never have. I've always wanted to be helpful in the moment. So if somebody calls and they're like, "Hey, I'm running an event tomorrow. I just found out about it and I don't know what to do for an opening." I'm like, "Gosh, I want to help you." So I'll be on the phone, and my wife, I mean, she's adapted to it in a big way. She just knows that if I'm on the phone, she'll just wait. And she'll just sit on the couch for me to finish. And sometimes it takes forever. And something that I think pushed me over the edge, and this goes to the question that Sean asked, which came from the chat or the Q&A about burnout, is like, I found myself getting super stressed because I'm actually doing more work right now that I'm not getting paid for, and that I'm trying to help other people and companies with, that it gave me headaches. And I just didn't like the way that I woke up in the morning, and that I'm working, past dark. And I'm like, do I even need to take a shower? I didn't even leave the seat for the entire day. And I did take a shower, promise, partially. But what I ended up doing, that was a long-winded way of saying, for the last 2 nights, and this isn't long enough to know that this actually works, but for the last 2 nights, I actually turned my phone off, 100% off. Can't actually get on it, turn the computer screen off, and literally had no means of communication with the outside world because of it. And it helped. Nobody that I know needed me or anything like that, thank God. I'm just trying to figure out ways to do that where I can completely disengage. And I followed Tim's advice this morning. I wanted to be able to say that I did this. I got in my car this morning. I drove for 10 minutes. I came back and I went to work today. So I'm just trying to find tips and stuff like that to remain sane on my part.
Yeah. Emily, I know you probably have other questions. I want to monitor our time to keep you on your agenda. But I think the big thing around for us as a family and for companies is outside time. And it's going to get more and more tricky to manage it. And we got to keep the social distancing. But on calls, I used to do this when we do day-long facilitations, is we would do what we call crack a lap, which is we're going to take this break. I assign a question, and you're going to walk around the building in groups of 2 to answer the question, then come back in the room. And it's a great technique. And I got to do it now on the phone with folks or in the middle of a conference call. Okay, time's up. I'm going to play some music here. It's a 5-minute crack-a-lap. It's hard to get them back, but pushing, I think, physical activity and outdoor activity is hugely important. And then I think understanding that burnout is going to be different. To use that mountain metaphor, Sean, at the beginning of the call here, when we got trapped in one of those camps high on a mountain, this happened to be Everest, in a storm, couldn't go up, couldn't go down, and the group didn't manage it well. We had people in the group that were willing to just go down. But the avalanches are terrible. You can't. It doesn't matter. I can't stay here any longer. I'm going down. And because they thought just taking some action would be better than no action. And even though staying in camp was safer and a much more rational decision. So I think we just need to anticipate that. We talked about that as a family last night, and that vulnerability bit that JJ mentioned. I told my family at dinner, I had a tough day yesterday. Thank God we got out for a walk, and that really helped me. So I think burnout it's not going to necessarily disappear, to Valerie's point. I think it's going to shift. And I think we just need to be real about that as people, as leaders. The stress of this is high. And let's be ready for it, and let's talk about it.
Absolutely. And I think in talking with some people, now is the time to use this as an opportunity as well. And I think, when you look back and going back to what Noah had said on a previous webinar and John was paraphrasing it earlier, which is simply just, if we can fast forward and be in that spot and we can look back, what could we have done different or what could we have changed? Well, let's go do it now if we can, right? Assuming that we could. So with that, we're going to jump into the lightning round, which is really our final round, where we'll just ask a single question. Before we get into that, we just want to say thank you guys for being on here. We really appreciate your insight. You guys bring a bunch of different perspectives. And that's really what we're trying to do here, is get different perspectives of how to adapt, how to overcome, given our current situation, which essentially is changing every day. And so we really appreciate you. We appreciate the audience. Thank you for submitting, the questions and keeping this engaging. We will be posting all of this on the website afterwards, converting it into a podcast. So plenty ways of, plenty opportunities to reconsume this, as well as we're now producing 3 webinars per week. So 3 episodes per week. So feel free to jump in there, share it with any friends or colleagues. And we always like feedback. So Emily's going to be dropping a link into the chat, which is just a simple feedback form. If you could take 2 seconds to just give us a little bit of feedback, we'd really love it. We're just ultimately trying to make this valuable for you. So with all that said, we'll shift into the last question, which we like to call the lightning round now. And basically that is, and Valerie, we'll start with you. That is, what is the one takeaway that you want our listeners to walk away with today?
I think that we should all be looking for the silver linings in this pandemic. Like a crisis is a terrible opportunity to waste. And I think to the extent that we can learn what's working better for us, to Noah's point as well, I think that's where we walk out of this feeling like I did the best I could and I learned something and I'm better for it. And I think if we can all feel that way coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's a good way to feel.
Excellent. How about you, Jamie?
This is so great that we lost JJ, because now it's just Valerie and I. We get to go back and forth here. I think...
Take his time. Take his time.
Good point. We're going to take his time, Valerie. For us, if I could paint a mountain metaphor, because that's how my brain works, on Mount Everest, there's this thing called the Khumbu Ice Fall. It's a crazy world. To get through these huge crevasses, they're fissures, crevasses, we use these aluminum ladders. And you lay them across and then walk. It's pretty dangerous and scary. But what's powerful, and it may be one of the most powerful lessons that mountaineering for 25 years around the world taught me, was about when you walk across that ladder, where do you put your focus? You have this huge hole that's 200-300 feet deep. It's full of boogie monsters and scary stuff. And then you have these little tiny rungs that you have to put your boots carefully upon. And it's very difficult to focus on those rungs. And that really is the mantra for us. It's like, focus on the rungs. And the crevasses are emblematic of all the stuff right now that's out of our control, that we can't really influence, but is a huge distractor. And we need to know about it. That's our due diligence and our risk management and our intelligence. Right? We have to be engaged in it, risk, but really for our business, and there's overlap. And just really, that's the thing, if I can offer anything. Focus on the rungs. It's scary now, but there's some freedom on the other side.
Yeah, that's a great point. Focusing on the rungs, and that kind of leads into what we say a lot here, which is just control what you can control. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, and we know it's rapidly evolving. So again, Jamie, Valerie, and JJ, who had to drop early, we're super thankful. Thank you for attending today. Attendees, again, if you could just provide us some feedback, we're always open to it, and we ultimately want to provide you guys all value. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe and stay vigilant. Thank you.
And Valerie and Jamie, if you can hang out for a minute, that'd be great.
Thanks.